Flag's out that way.
Outside.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lighting is challenging here. Give me a minute.
Kim Thomas,
Here.
Dave Ward,
Wait, there's a lot of extraneous talk. Please.
Anthony Moranti,
Here.
Kim Connor,
Here.
David Hardy,
Here.
Peter Lewis,
Here.
Neil Tillman,
Here.
and Dennis Gagnon.
Here. Approval of minutes from April of this year. Any additions, corrections, deletions?
So I had one thing, which is on page 2 at the top. It says both lots will become less conforming. It shouldn't be less non-conforming.
Okay. Anybody else? I'll give you a second. I'll give you a moment. Dave? Neil? Any changes? No. Peter? Move to adopt the minutes of April 20th.
I'll make that motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
One little note, introducing a new member, Dennis Gagnon, to the board. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We have a public hearing, Stonecrop Gardens. Would you, Linda, read the public notice?
The application involves a 67.25 acre parcel, which has been developed as an educational institute. The former visitor center on the property was destroyed by fire, and the center now proposes to replace the structure, generally on the same footprint with a larger facility, which will encompass a welcome center and also incorporate a workshop area. Parking at the site will also be expanded and include a handicapped access walkway to the new structure.
Who's here representing?
Glennon Watson from Beatty and Watson for Stonecrop Gardens. As a public notice said, this is a 67-acre site, and the board I have now shows you the entire 67 acres. It's located on the north side of Route 301, opposite Dennytown Road, and it goes up to the back. Its back line goes to Glenwood Farm, as does some of the land to the northwest. The property houses Stonecrop Gardens, which is, all of you know, is a public garden frequented by many people. It also houses the Equestrian Center, the Therapeutic Equestrian Center, whose name has changed, but I don't remember it. So we have two special use permits going on here. Stonecrop Gardens is a public garden. It's a teaching garden, and it has, over the years that it's come to some renown. They had a fire which partially destroyed a building that they decided to take down and replace. The garden is pretty much in the center of the property. The building we're going to be talking about on the next board is this brighter colored orange building on the board that I'm showing you. And so the next board will concentrate on the center of the property so that you'll see what is in the planning stage, or what has been planned, I should say. So this is an enlarged and rendered portion of the core of the property. The main entrance comes in from the bottom of the map, and it comes into a relatively small existing parking area today. The plan is to extend that parking area and with a number of spaces that are going to be tucked into the woods. And we've picked the parking spaces based on the location of the trees that will minimize the removal of trees, so that you'll get, and I think I said this before to the board, but I think you'll get more of the sense of the parking lot that you find at Boscobel, where they have where they have the farmer's market in the summer months, as opposed to what you might see at a shopping center or something like that. In fact, I think there's some elements of it which will be even a little more rustic. So the parking lot will be enlarged, and there will be a circular element of the parking lot where people will come in, go through the parking lot counterclockwise, and then be able to exit. As they come in from the south and move, or from the southwest, like southeast rather, and move about halfway through the parking circle, those who need closest parking spaces, handicaps will have spaces, they will be able to turn right and park in this area, or they would be able to continue further and park near the new building. So this is one of the main elements of the site plan. The next element is that building that I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation that had partially burned down and then was taken down, will be replaced by what they call the Bothy, a place where people buy their tickets, where there's small meeting areas, where they really, after having experienced the beginnings of the garden and getting a taste of it, they will get to the point where if they want to go through the rest, they will get their tickets, they will go through, and they will enter the garden, which is further up to the northwest. During our discussions, we conveyed to you that we did have an issue with the height of the building because the ridge line, a protected ridge line, runs right through the property. We're limited in height to 30 feet instead of the normal 40. We referred to the Zoning Board of Appeals. We made that appeal, and it was successful. So we do have a variance to raise the steeple portion of the tower portion of the building to 37 feet. It's largely will not be visible to anybody off-site. It will keep the building vocabulary the same throughout, where these steeples that are both functional and artistic will be part of this building as well as it is the several other buildings. I received a copy of the variance a couple of days ago. I saw that most of the members of the board were sent that email as well, so I'm assuming you have it. Other than that, it's just an enhancement to the garden. The garden will serve the public better. The garden will work better for everyone, and we hope you'll see it fit to approve it. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Questions from the board? Glenn? Anyone? Okay, I'll open it up to the audience. Questions? No? Ron, you have any comments before we close the hearing?
Well, the board has a technical memorandum from me summarizing the current status of the project. Necessary referrals had previously been done. You're now ready to make a seeker declaration. There are a few technical issues that remain to be resolved, but they can easily be done. The Department of Health still remains to be an agency that requires approval for the new sanitary disposal system. And at the direction of the board, we had prepared both a draft negative seeker declaration and a special permit and site plan approval resolution for your consideration tonight. So they're before you now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Peter.
Ask one thing, because Ron had pointed out in the memo he sent around, now that the Zoning Board of Appeals has passed the ridge line issue, the night sky guidelines really become fairly important. So how does that get addressed specifically at this point?
Well, we've identified that as a concern in my technical memorandum, and I've carried that forward in the approval resolution, that has to be resolved as part of the approval, in addition to the Department of Health approval. So those are identified in conditions. Once they're satisfied, the plan will be signed and not before.
Okay.
So, having been at Glenwood recently, late at night, the lights from the Equestrian Center are incredibly bright in that area. I don't know if is this building high enough that it's required to be lit for aircraft or anything?
No,
to worry about. It's not really that level. Yeah. Did we talk about the lighting for it?
This is the first time really mentioned it.
Not the equestrian center for this.
No, I don't know.
I don't
We had,
think,
it had been raised in prior technical reviews, but I don't know if there was much discussion on it. It's the reason I've carried it forward and left it on the table.
can you tell us about it, Glenn, at all?
I can't tell you a lot about it. We're perfectly happy to make it night sky compliant and to make all of the fixtures work in that regard. It's just, frankly, that's just become the practice today. You just have to do it.
Okay.
I would like to reiterate the discussion last month about handicapped accessibility. If you just briefly review how you're handling that, how it's different than what it was.
Yes, it was, we originally wanted all of the handicap space at the westerly-most portion of the parking lot in a little offshoot of the parking lot. We were, and still are actually, want to minimize any vehicular access or into the space between that original handicapped space and the bothy, because we consider it part of the experience of the garden. Starts as soon as you go through this little welcome building here, where you can pick up pamphlets and you can see what's going on. That was met with your strong resistance, your very strong concern that handicap parking be closer. So what we felt was a reasonable compromise, we moved, in addition to this parking, I shouldn't say we moved it, but in addition to the parking, we extended the driveway out so that it could be, so that a car could go through there and go up towards the bothy, and we put a space here. It looks like two spaces, it's really one space and a landing area. So that about half the distance a person would have to walk. And we, of course, do still have the ability to transport people back and forth if that becomes necessary. We need the number of spaces, and we've provided them. Experience is told, the staff has told us their experience with handicap spaces is they don't have that much of a demand that they do offer people to call ahead so that they can be taken care of and accommodated better than, they could become better, I guess, period.
Okay, thank you. Steve, you have anything?
Out of curiosity, this building we're calling the Welcome Center?
I think this is called the Welcome Center. The entrance pavilion. This is the Welcome Center? Or this is they call it the bothy.
Where does the term bothy come from?
Well, maybe you could tell me. It's a new word to me.
It's where the garden.
You have to step to the microphone.
This is Caroline Burgess. She's the executive director.
Good evening. The term bothy is an ancient term. It's actually a house that usually is alongside a larger house, and it's usually where all the gardeners live.
Okay, you guys got it now?
Just an old-fashioned name.
Not in the U.S. so much.
Good Scrabble
It's the same building.
There was a welcome pavilion, and then there was a welcome center.
Yes. Yeah, there's a pass-through here, actually. It's not as big as the rendering would tell you.
Okay. If there are no further comments, I'll close the public hearing. Motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Declare a negative deck. Ron? We have our engineer has prepared a negative declaration on the seeker. Ron, you have any comments on this for you?
No, it's a standard form you've seen before. Just presenting the particulars of this application.
Motion to adopt the negative declaration.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then the second item is the resolution with the requirement that these two items be completed. Is that correct, Ron?
Right.
Night
right.
sky and elevations?
Right, it identifies the Putnam County Department of Health as requiring that approval from that agency, and technical comments that I've raised and payment of outstanding fees.
Move to adopt, oh, go ahead.
Covers both the special permit granting and both the site plan.
Move to adopt a resolution. This is combined in one, is that not right? All right.
Exactly.
A second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Linda, there was Old Span in our packet, but we're not seeing them
No,
tonight,
no.
right?
No, they just
Before you guys pull out your stuff, I'm changing the agenda.
Okay.
Item number 3 on your agenda, McHugh, we're going to do that first, and then we'll spend more time on, we're going to do McHugh subdivision first. Should go quickly, I hope. Damn, lighting in here.
So it's terrible. And the echo
I'm
was
going
bad,
blind.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, well. Hi. Thanks.
Right.
Just so we're all on the same page, this is McHugh subdivision. Okay, Glenn.
Okay. Really here tonight just for a referral. The application is for a lot line adjustment because the adjustment that is to be made goes over the 10% that you're allowed to do without planning board approval. Typical of our lot line adjustment maps, on the left we have, the story is really told on the left. We have two parcels, one owned by Mary McHugh and her husband, Mr. Miwa, forget his first name. And that's the green up on this top panel. On the larger red panel is owned by Mary McHugh and her three siblings. It was part of their mother's estate. For those of you who've been around, the McHugh family and related to the Bradys, they owned an awful lot of the land around Lake Surprise Road. I guess this is sort of the last piece. Some of it has gone to the state, some of it has gone into private hands. So the proposal is to take this green area on the middle panel and take it out of the red area and put it into the upper green area so that when we're finished with this, if we're all approved, we will have more green for Mary McHugh. She will, and just to tell you a little of the business story, this is the way the family has decided to break it up. Mary McHugh wants more land adjacent to the land where she lives. The other siblings, I guess it is, want to sell the property because they're all out of town. They all live far away. So she's getting roughly a quarter of the property. The other children are getting 3/4, and then they're going to sell it. So why are we here for a referral? If you look closely at the maps that you were given in the packages, which are full-size maps, you'll see that this big red piece that exists now has 22 feet of frontage right here at the southern tip of Mary McHugh's personal property. If you add that 22 feet of frontage plus the frontage that the siblings own down here at the southeast end of the property, it still isn't enough to make a legal lot. We are proposing to reduce the already non-conforming frontage by that 22 feet. So we're making a more non-conforming lot. Of course, Mary's lot will now be conforming, so that's going the other way. For those of you who are not really familiar with where we are on Lake Surprise Road, this is just past the entrance to Deer Hollow, the Deer Hollow Road, and there is a precipitous drop down to that stream. So while we could construct a lot that would keep that frontage by maybe having a flagpole come out to this 22 feet of frontage, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to us because it's almost sheer right at that point, and the idea of somebody building a driveway or filling it or building a bridge over it is just not in the cards. It's not a practical thing. So rather than have this oddly shaped piece of property with no function, we decided that we would present it this way, ask for your referral back to the zoning board, and see if the zoning board would give us a referral. If we get it, we'll come back with this exact plan. If we don't get it, we will refashion this to create this little strip of land to keep the frontage.
Questions?
Yeah. So in the deeds, there's a deed from 1995 or 96 that divides it into 3 lots, one, like 2 vacant parcels. Was this ever subdivided, or I'm not sure, Steve, this is probably a question for you.
I don't know exactly why they did that. I believe that this line is one of the original parcels, and this piece was from a separate source of title. It never got, she did Mrs. McHugh, Jane, I think her name was, did sell off her house, and she did did a little subdivision down in here. That was approved by the planning board. This, I think it was just a matter of describing these parcels in a way that kept them in their original chain of title, or at least kept them in reference to their original chain of title, but I don't really know.
Because my concern here is that we not create a situation like we had with Tawana, where we had lots that were created by deed as opposed to by being subdivided. So I'd like to know what the status is with this particular piece.
It's all taxed as one parcel. It's all on one deed. That I know for sure.
Well, Glenn, I can tell you that if you do come back for subdivision approval, the lot line approval, one of the conditions is going to be that they file a consolidation with the county regarding the multiple parcels within the larger one.
Yeah,
You're going to want one parcel.
I don't think that'll be a problem.
No, you could do
Not
it
a
by
big deal.
form. They could deed it to themselves. A lot of different ways they could do it. But
Yeah.
before this board approves it, you're going to clean up that issue with the.
Just back up, because
It's hard to hear you.
the audio in here is nothing. Well, the first thing you started to say about before he comes back, he has to do what?
Just talk louder.
If they come back from the zoning board with the variance that they want, and if this board grants the 2-lot subdivision that they're looking for, one of the conditions of approval will be that you file a form with the county for consolidation. Usually it's separate tax lots. If they have an illegal subdivision, it'll work the same way. The other way they could affect that is if they do a deed from themselves to themselves. They're going to be doing a deed anyway for the portion that they're deeding over. So at that time, they would just put together the deeds. They'd show them to the board. I'll take a look at them, make sure that they're going to. And at the end of the day, you're going to wind up with 2 separate lots, the smaller one and the larger one, and that'll clean up the issue that Kim's speaking to.
Because if they're going to sell the larger one, whoever gets that is going to come before us, presumably. So.
Well, maybe not. I mean, if you're just going to put a single-family home on it or something, you may not see
Not
it.
before us, before is going to want to put a.
Yeah.
Addressing the point that Kim made, I remember when this happened a number of years ago, and there was talk about the town modifying the zoning to prohibit subdivision by deed. Is that not the case, or has it been?
Subdivision by deed is pretty much illegal now. It's an illegal subdivision if you go in. I suppose if you're under the amount for lot line changes, maybe you can skirt it that way. But to actually create a new lot, that's I mean, it's not illegal in the sense that it's criminal or anything, but you have a title problem.
zoning
and
issue.
Exactly, they could be cited for it if the county
Okay.
is inclined to enforce that.
Ryan, any comments?
You have a technical memorandum from my office. I tried to summarize the current status. As Glenn indicates, there's a nonconformity with the larger lot that requires referral to the Zoning Board of Appeals. That would be an appropriate action to take tonight. Just for information, the smaller lot likewise has a nonconformity. It has to do with the front yard setback. There's a driveway right along Lake Surprise Road. Doesn't meet the front yard setback, but it's not being made any more nonconforming, so it doesn't require any action by the ZBA. So it's only the larger lot that needs that. Recognizing that it is just a lot line adjustment and recognizing they may be successful at the ZBA, you might want to schedule a site visit as part of your normal course. Just whenever he does return, you'll have that matter resolved, if you care to make an inspection of the frontages.
I want to ask you, does the board have any more questions on this? I'll entertain a motion to refer this to the zoning board for the variance needed.
I'll move to.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Site visit is it your recommendation that this needs a site visit?
The board's discretion. On these minor issues, you may not see it necessary. I just want to raise the issue, just so you can make a decision. It similarly needs referral to the county planning board, planning department, because of its proximity to Hudson Highlands State Park.
Okay, a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Lot line adjustment, I mean, what are we really looking at if we go on a site visit?
There's no issue with the existing structure. They're just adding property.
How does the board feel?
Not much different from the Stanton project that you just approved last month.
I mean, it's one more Sunday we can save for Glenn. Hi, Glenn. Unless there's a burning desire to go, I'm not going to ask for a motion.
The ZBA should visit it, but I don't see that we
Yeah.
have to.
Them hash it out.
So we're not going to.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Okay, the main show.
Where are they?
Oh. Maybe they're still in town hall waiting to get in. They were fully informed, were they not? Horton Road, Hudson Islands. Oh, are they going to be here, Glenn? The folks? Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Sorry. Yeah, that's I could.
I really don't have an awful lot to say. You know, you've got a report from Ron and Susan. There was another report from Ron. We've been working towards a set of plans that will actually be submitted formally for your action. All of this effort since you've adopted the conservation analysis has been to sort of head off the real big problems with the subdivision, mitigate as many of the impacts as we could during our design process, and we appreciate the time you've taken to look at the plan as it has developed. It's developed further since you've seen it. I think in several good ways, and it's frankly still developing a little bit, but we're down to fairly minor changes. This is the plan that one of the two plans in the AKRF Gainer report that you'll be reviewing in a moment. It shows the things we talked about last month. It shows that the roads are no longer on the steep slopes. It shows that we've still protected the ancient road, and it shows that where we've concentrated the houses, they are on the more developable areas of the property. Two things that we have discussed and that I will share with you that are in the works now. We are, Susan and Ron both recommended, and actually we recommended in the office that this long cul-de-sac to the southwest be shortened. We're going to pull it back to about here, so it'll be about half as long. Access the driveway to this lot, to the furthest lot out. And what we've decided to do in order to try to accommodate the desire for a corridor from the pond to that steep slope that goes down to Clove Creek, we're going to move one of these houses out of the way and open up a corridor through there. And the way we're going to compensate on our side for that is we're going to make the old house that's the subject of that 1922 house that's architecturally significant and a candidate for restoration. We're going to make that one of the lots, and we're going to use that. And this way we've done a couple of things. We've provided the corridor. We have a shortened road, and we haven't lost a lot, and we provided for somebody really in charge of one of the houses that will be restored. We talked about that having been a clubhouse. We're going to move that over to the barn and adaptively reuse that 1825 barn so that the building numbers will, so that we'll use that same building. So that's, those are, I don't even think Susan heard this part of it. I did ask Ron in a brief phone call, kind of told him what we were talking about, but I think we've accomplished that. I know there was some desire to move the road down to the 100-foot line to make a demarcation between the 100-foot line and the lots. We think that's, still don't think that's a good idea, mostly because we would have then road runoff that would be running mostly, that would be on a much shorter path, much shorter flow towards the lake, and we'd have more problems with it. So, but I think we've accomplished that. You haven't seen, I don't know if you've seen this cul-de-sac, but that's what some of the lots were there. We've moved lots around, and I say as we're aiming towards a June 1st submission of a formal set of engineered plans for your consideration. We are aware that there will be a new EAF parts 1 and 2 of part 1 by us, part 2 for your consideration and editing. We do know that there are things that are not talked about in there yet, or traffic. I think maybe stormwater is not talked about yet, but the rest of it I think is there. You may at some point have other concerns as you view when you finally get the formal set of plans to actually review and consider.
Two latest things I have, one May 11th and another one today, analysis by Ron. I want to commend Ron on his numbers crunching. I think he worked on a Manhattan project. But Susan, we've got this one from the two of you, if you would care to summarize that.
Sure.
The latest one from today.
Thanks. Basically, Ron and I went back and forth and put this together to be as concise as possible and to really tie things together and to identify the main issues that are still sort of hanging out there. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You see the plan that Glenn has up. If you look at the diagram here on the last page, it's pretty much showing that plan, contrasting with the last plan that was officially reviewed and submitted. And that's just so you could follow through the memo. Basically, the memo just goes through it and clarifies what's being shown on the newest map that we're looking at, which we're calling the progress plan. And now, once Glenn submits it, we'll call it the next submission. But it was just really sort of confusing with all the different plans going on and what we saw outside of what you guys saw. So we went through, you saw a lot of what we saw on the site, just we had the next version of the plan to look at. The newest plan is showing 25 buildings as opposed to 29 buildings. The access road is still from Route 9, and it goes, instead of having this loop kind of configuration, now we have a spine type of configuration where there's one main road that goes all the way through the property. And then to get back out, you would
you would return on that same road, and then there are the houses either fronting on that central road or fronting on cul-de-sacs that are coming off of that road. The design is continuing to protect the historic roadway, and it actually gives a little bit better access to that historic roadway. And I know Kim has a question about that, but once we go through this, I think we could talk about all the separate issues. So this layout really addresses the topography better. It looks at the roadways, where they're going, and the houses, that they're not as much as possible on the steepest terrain, as you see in the darker green. There's some places where it's unavoidable. One of the biggest issues that is still, is not resolved yet, that Glenn just spoke to, is that roadway that goes to the west of the pond, and questioning, is there a better way of doing that that would maintain that wildlife corridor that exists now between Clove Creek and the pond. And then the issue of where that 100-foot buffer is, how is that defined? Does the public have access to the pond? This plan has a little bit better access to the pond because there's no house. I believe if it's still on that plan, Glenn, there's no house right where Glenn's showing there. So there is actually frontage of the public-ish roadway, the community roadway to the pond. So it gives a better access in terms of not having to skirt through people's properties. So that is an improvement. But those houses still, it's questionable how they're going to impact the long-term viability and water quality of the pond. So that's still sort of a lingering issue there. I like hearing that Glenn's planning, that they're planning on reusing one of the historic structures for a residence. I think that's a really good idea. I'd actually like to see the other existing residence that's on the site, which is all the way up there, the one that connects to East Mountain Road. I wish that was one of the lots as well. I don't see why not, even if they want to tear down the building and put a new building. It seems like low-hanging fruit to actually use that instead of creating a new house. And then, of course, as they go along, they're going to have to address how they're dealing with the maintenance and the removal of sewage from the equestrian center, because we all know that is a major issue. So that has to be addressed to make sure that it does not find its way anywhere near the pond, which is concerning. So I'm just going to go through the comments, which I really think point out the main points, most of which I just made, but there's one or two that might be new. So as I said, it's substantially more responsive to the existing topography. The elimination of the loop road addresses more of the cut and fill. The grade of the road is in a little bit of a better position now. The 3 dead-end roads actually follow the grade much better than in the last version. And the open space provides more connectivity in terms of human use of open space. It definitely has a better flow to it than before, meaning that now, let me just show you. Now there's more access to that roadway that they're proposing to be part of the conservation easement. There's access here. That's nobody's property. That allows people, at least, to come this way. The roadway still is a barrier to animals, to some animals, meaning the lowest ones to the ground. And again, there's also this access. I would want to nudge the shape of this around a little bit to provide an easier access. It just gives a better flow, and I could imagine them putting in paths that would bring people around the property a little bit better. All that said, There's the pond, the health of the pond that has to be addressed, and the fact that the applicant may consider to reduce the number of lots, reduce the sizes of the lots, or, and the length of the dead-end west side, which is what Glenn mentioned. I'm a little concerned still about having a significant corridor there. I guess we'll know when we see what you're proposing. I'd rather see 3 houses on that cul-de-sac, 4 houses, but going all the way around and taking that space from, pretty much cuts off the 2 different areas of the property. So another comment that we made is there's a big question about pos deck, neg deck, and why you would want to go with one or the other. And this sort of talks to it. I don't think you need a pos deck for this, but if the board doesn't come to a place where they're comfortable with it, one of the things that an EIS does is it mandates the comparison of alternatives. So you would be able to ask for a comparison of the yield plan, which you could do anytime you want. You could ask the applicant to provide a yield plan to see if that would be better in terms of environmental consciousness because of how many lots they could actually get on the site in a yield plan. You could compare it to an alternative use of the site like mining, which would be probably a much worse use in terms of environmental impacts. So that's, and then you would also compare it to the no build. So that's one of the tools that the EIS process gives you. And the other tool is more access of the public being able to ask those questions on the record and demand the answers in a scoping document for the EIS. So just to let you know the reasons that you might consider one way or the other. That said, I think if you get to a place where you're happy with and you see that these concerns are taken care of, there's not definitely a reason for a pos deck or a neg deck at this point, as I see it. I don't think we're there yet. And then finally, I wanted to just reiterate the role of the Hudson Highlands Trust in this project. It's much more preferable for the Hudson Highlands Trust to take this conservation easement, to hold it and manage it, rather than the other alternative the only other alternative that there seems to be is that the town would hold the easement. And in that case, there'd probably be minimal enforcement and minimal management of it. So I would recommend that as much as possible, keep Hudson Highlands Trust in the loop and really give weight to their opinions and to their values and what they need in order to make it an easement that they would want to hold. So that's about it. Sure.
Questions for Susan? Peter.
Want me to start? Okay. I guess I have a question that kind of goes back a little bit. Well, first of all, public parking, I assume, is going to be incorporated into this plan when you have a notion of where you want to have public access to the pond, right? Which would be...
The question of public access is really still up in the air. I mean, we were here with 29 lots, assuming we could get bonuses. It's been, and we're still open to the idea of public access. But if we're only going to get what, to get the bonuses, we have to give you public access, and we're willing to do that if we get to the lot count we need, and that lot count is 25. We've got a discrepancy between what Mr. Gaynor came up with and what we came up with. Fortunately, it's only one lot, and so I'm not so embarrassed that it looks like I was making up the numbers, so I feel okay about that. But if it does, and we both recognize that what we have to do is make these calculations again when we come up with the final plan, because that's what's going to dictate it. If we get to the point where we get to 25 lots, I'm certain that we'll have public access, and we do have some room for parking around the barn. I'm sure we could find another place where we could do some parking.
Okay. My only other question is this, and this may be something that's been trampled over before I came, so you can just tell me to move on, but why was there no Horton Road access to this development. We have a,
There's really two reasons. The very first site visit we made, which has got to be over 2 years ago, we had a little Horton Road army out there who said, you will not use Horton Road, and that certainly influenced the decision. And so we want to be a good neighbor. We don't want to have the neighbors be unhappy. But the other issue about Horton Road is, if you know, Horton Road is relatively flat and level for about 2/3 of its, maybe half of its length, at which point it makes a very sharp turn and a very sharp drop. Now, getting a horse trailer around there would be very difficult. The idea of those off-site improvements is very expensive, and then would undoubtedly involve wetlands permits if it could be done at all, because it's near the creek. And just to go one step further on that, the same sort of the idea of going north to East Mountain Road North and going out here up to the East Mountain Road really presented the same problems. A major amount of work to get the grades. If you could grade it, the road work would all be right next to a stream that's coming down, and I mean literally right next to a stream. So and the improvements would be exceptional. So that's why we decided not to go that way.
yeah, okay. I can appreciate the obvious problems, because the road off Route 9 is essentially going to be like the Delaware Water Gap. I mean, it's going to be incredible to make a slope. It's going to be anything that's functional in the wintertime.
Well, that road is going to be a 12% road. That's the steepest grade on that road. It is a significant cut. We've actually reduced that cut by a substantial amount in the design here from the previous design. What we know we have going for us is we have that sandy soil that was going to be the subject of the soil mine, and we believe that and testing so far has indicated that we'll be able to capture a lot of our on-site stormwater and move it off to the side of the road and capture it. It's an expensive road to build, there's no question about it, and if there were a better way to come up, we would have taken it, but it really doesn't seem like there is.
You know, this old letter from, or a letter we've seen before got, circulated again. And some of these, this is from the Conservation Board. And I don't know whether this is the right time to ask these questions or not, but there's a bunch of them in here, and there's some things that I don't recall having, an answer for. So, I mean, the thing, this letter starts out, it doesn't start out, but the first thing is that, it's about the environmental assessment for the seeker, and based on the reasoning below, which would lend the CB to advise the planning board to consider issuing a positive declaration in regards to the seeker process. So, and then there follows, their sort of objections to what's going on or what they think is happening. And I don't know, I'm not asking you to answer every question right now, but am I wrong about this? Did we hear the right answers to all this? Yeah. Should we talk about them now, or should we get a response? Okay, that comment letter, I think, came in February. The board did discuss it briefly. It's understood that there's open issues that need to be responded to. My sense at the time that was initially discussed was that I think the board recognized the plan was still evolving, and you can see tonight it's still evolving. Right. There's been significant progress, if we can ignore the issue of density right now, in terms of the original proposal that you walked in early April. I mean, the extent of cuts and fills, the extent of disturbance on the property is significantly reduced by this latest concept by eliminating the loop road. The other significant issue that the board had was the lots in the vicinity of the pond. So I think, I'm not an advocate for the applicant, but the applicant is attempting to understand what can be done to minimize the number of those lots. I think one part of the new cul-de-sac next to the equestrian center is to try to push some of that density that might have stayed around the pond, which is an attractive area. So they have another place within the project to put that once the board ultimately understands and agrees with the issue of density. So there's been some enhancements that have been done to the plan. It would be good to revisit those issues when they make a formal submittal of what they believe the preferred plan will be. But I mean, they were talking about stormwater issues, and you can't really address that until you have a plan that you're willing to support. There's no reason to invest the engineering.
Yeah, that's what
Right.
I'm asking.
And I've discussed that with Max specifically, because, I mean, he and I talk. And he does recognize that while there's holes in the document, it all has to be based on a plan that the planning board will support. So we'll revisit those issues. I'm not taking a position on either side of an EIS, but we need to revisit that once we think we have a plan that actually is responsive to your concerns and recognizes the reality of the property.
Fair enough.
But let me just add, with that said, I think it might be a good idea for the applicant to respond to some of these things, just so you have it on record.
We will when we submit the next version of our EAF, we'll address that.
It's Neil's turn.
No, that's fine. You have a copy of this? I think that's great. You'll incorporate these into your next version.
I'll have answers for them. We'll incorporate what we think is appropriate.
Anything else? No. Okay, so I have a bunch of questions. My first question, I went and looked at the zoning, and the zoning says, and this has to do with the old road. So my question is really where the idea that it had to be preserved came from, because in the zoning, it says wherever feasible, retain and reuse existing old farm roads and lanes rather than constructing new roads or driveways.
I'm sorry.
The echo in here is terrible. Okay, so I was going to ask this last month, but I'm asking it now. In our zoning, it says in 175-31, wherever feasible, retain and reuse existing old farm roads and lanes rather than constructing new roads or driveways. And so I wanted to know where the directive to preserve that road came from.
In your conservation analysis, you'll see that the woman that did the architectural review, section 3, I think it was, she made specific note of the historic character of that road and that the historic character should be preserved. The fact is, we can't do that and have a serviceable road because, first of all, there's not enough space between the walls. We could put we could do a divided thing on either side of the wall, maybe, but again, you'd be ruining the character of the road.
Okay, I didn't understand why that had been bothering me. So that's one thing. So part of this property is in the M district, and you talked last time about asking the town board to change the zoning from M to conservation.
A petition has been prepared and I believe been delivered. It's been delivered to the town board seeking that zoning change.
Okay, so while it's still part of the M district, there's no housing permitted in the M district. It's the only district we have that doesn't allow houses.
And we're not proposing any housing in the M district.
No, you're not, but you are counting that land as part of your calculations.
It would be permanently preserved. And I think if you look at the earlier AKRF memo, it said that we must preserve that land. And if we must preserve it, we should get to count it as preserved. It's just, to me, it's just logical.
You're saying that that land is constrained land?
Oh, it's very constrained land, yeah. It's steep.
Isn't that where the road is, though? Isn't the portion that's the
Yeah,
M district where the road is?
and that's the one place we can't really, we just can't avoid that constrained land.
Okay. So,
One of the few places.
So I guess what I'm asking is how we address that. If, let's say the town board doesn't change the zoning, will we have to revisit this, whether or not it counts as part of the constrained land, since it's this?
That question remains to be answered. It's been identified as a question. Your code is silent as to how it's addressed in a conservation subdivision. It's not specifically addressed in the formula that's provided for the applicant to use. And he's, obviously asked to have that considered in the density. That's something that I presume the town attorney will weigh in on at some point, but it's something the board is going to wrestle with, because it doesn't impact, as I understand it, there's, if you go through my density calcs, which is a separate memorandum that you have tonight, I think there's two lots of density he gets from that M zone property. And so that's a question that remains to be answered.
No, go ahead. Can you answer?
Steve, in the best of times, time frame for getting a zoning change. I went through this years ago, but
Well, the thing about this particular zoning change is that it's the same secret review that you have pending in front of you. In fact, I think we did a coordinated review on this. Pretty sure. So, and if it's type 1 action, you got it. So, the town board is not going to be able to take action on the zoning change request until this board completes its secret review. Okay. So, you're going to have to make some assumptions in your secret review and say, well, if it's changed to M, then, this would be the impacts, and if it's not, then this would be. But you can certainly phrase your determination on that, accordingly. But it's going to take a little while. I think for the applicant, the most important thing will be seeing if the town is willing to undertake the change. You're going to have your local law drafted, you're going to have your local law introduced, you're going to have your public hearing on it, you're going to have to referral to county planning. So, even under the best of circumstances, you're talking, 60 days at an absolute minimum. More, but in this case, it's going to take longer because of the secret factor.
thanks. Tim?
Okay. So Susan already addressed the existing buildings, but, I agree with what she says about, that if we're going to talk about density, these buildings do exist, and I understand that they're accessory buildings, perhaps, right? But I think that we need to know what's going to happen with them. And then the last thing I want to ask about, because we keep pushing it to the side and not really addressing it, is the riding academy. So when I look at this plan, I don't know a lot about horses. I don't see any outdoor space for them. I don't see any paddocks or. That's this. I thought this was a building.
That's the barn.
This is the barn.
That's the paddock.
And this is a paddock. And how many? Is there an idea of how many horses it can hold and 40 horses?
I think it's 40, but
That's a lot of horses. So I went through our code just to look to see what the rules were about, a riding academy as opposed to an agricultural use. And it says that, so this isn't an agricultural use, this is a riding academy in a residential neighborhood. And it says in 175-49 that as far as maintenance of animals on residential properties, It says the amount of land required for keeping large animals shall be 40,000 square feet allocated to the residents plus 40,000 square feet per large livestock unit. One cow, horse, bison, pig, or similar large animal shall be considered one LLU. So I'm just wondering, Steve, how this applies to this particular use and whether there's enough land.
Well, the
For
enough
40
land
houses.
part, I can't speak to. I haven't looked into that. But I can tell you that the riding academy, along with the stabling of horses, is all one agricultural use. We went through this at the beginning when this application came in, and it's just not a separate commercial use. It's all part of the same agricultural use.
But it's not an agricultural zone. Right.
Well, no, but I think agricultural uses are permitted on this property. And
We have so I looked at the code and it says there's a separate commercial horse boarding operation. Okay. It's not, in other words, this isn't a farm. I guess that was the distinction we're making. This is not a farm organization. This is a commercial horse boarding
I hate to do this.
I'm sorry
Steve,
to bug you.
No, it's okay.
I'm having a hard time understanding
I
it.
just don't remember it all off the top of my head, but I will pull out the memo that we did early on when they first came in on this, and I'll circulate it to the whole board, and it kind of lays out the issue for you. And you can see this is all one agricultural use that they're proposing, and the agricultural use is considered an open space use, and open space use goes hand in glove with the conservation subdivision.
Okay. And so is there any kind of, is there something in the code that lets us, determine if there should be a limit on how many animals there are?
Yes, there is. I just sent an email around this afternoon, as a matter of fact. When you approve a conservation subdivision, you look at the open space and you make sure that the elements which need to be conserved are being appropriately maintained in the open space. And if you feel there's something in the open space, in this case the agricultural aspects of it, which do not appropriately preserve the conservation elements that you want preserved, you can eliminate it. So, for example, if there are buildings which may be agricultural,
What?
buildings, for example, which may be agricultural in nature, but you feel that they somehow interfere with whatever the element of the conservation is that's supposed to be preserved in that area, you can say, make the building smaller, or make it look differently, or even relocate it. I'll send you a copy of what I sent Ron this afternoon, too. I'll pass that around to everybody.
It's a good idea, too, because we do have at least 2 new members since this thing started. It might be good to bring people up to date.
But you got to tie the changes to whatever it is that's supposed to be conserved in that area. If it's slopes, if it's wetland, if it's a forest of some kind, you have to say, all right, this is why this is inappropriate, because this is the element of the environment we're trying to protect here, and that just doesn't fit in.
So I guess animal well-being is not under our jurisdiction, right?
Well, generally, no. No, it wouldn't be. I mean, if there was something in particular that would, for example, let's say that you have walking trails going through there and you expect pedestrian uses, you got a herd of horses interfering with the proposed use of it, that would be a problem. If it's, I don't know, environmentally sensitive as to water or something like that, maybe perhaps the sanitation of a very large herd would be an issue. We're getting a little far afield now, but that's the type of thing that you would look at.
And so, would it be appropriate to ask for, how much manure you would expect to generate from 40 horses? And
We fully expect to have to present a manure management plan.
It's just because we've talked so much about the houses, and yet I think that these horses are going to have a really big impact, and I think it's important that we discuss that.
One of the things that Susan touched on was, as you go forward with your secret review on this, which I guess is going to be coming up fairly quickly if they're submitting plans next month, you're going to be going through the part 2 of the EAF, and you're going to be looking at potential impacts and checking off what's small, what's moderate, what might be large. And they're going to have to show you that those impacts are being mitigated to the maximum extent practicable. One way you could, if one way you could establish that is by going through the EIS process and a positive declaration. I don't think you're going to wind up going down that road. I think what you're going to wind up with is what they call a Part 3 of an EAF, where a whole bunch of different studies, or at least as many as are necessary, get submitted. And one of the studies I would think that they're going to be submitting with their Part 3 will be the animal husbandry aspect of this, and things like maintenance of the property if and when the riding academy is up. You're going to see separate reports on those submitted with the Part 3 in an effort to allow you to reach a negative declaration. So that's why the Conservation Board's letter is, I think, very timely now. I know Ron is technically correct, of course, that they haven't submitted their plan, and so you can't get into the, but they're going to be submitting their plan. And they should be aware that these issues are things they're going to need to answer, and they may be answering in them when they submit that Part 3 EAF.
Yeah, let me just be clear with that. I mean, Dave has clearly indicated that you've got the CB letter, but if you recall, you also got a separate letter from Hudson Highlands. The entire board's seen those letters that go back to January and February. They've also been provided to the applicant previously, and I've had clear discussions with Glenn that they need to be responded to as part of the package that comes in to give you whatever information they can provide to assure you that they're attempting to address those concerns. So it's not just the CB letter, there's others in the record that you want to respond to.
And I just want to qualify one thing that Steve just said. I don't think it's going to go to a POSDEC either, but that all depends on what's going to be presented by the applicant. If the applicant doesn't get there, then it can go to the POSDEC. If the applicant doesn't get to where you want it, does mitigate those impacts with their plan, then it doesn't have to. So I don't think we could say right now, because at this point, it's not clear.
So I think that's it for me for now. So you're up, Andy.
I want to ask Michelle, the memo from you, we've had so much paperwork. Is it possible to regenerate that for the board? Yeah. Especially new members? Yeah. I'd appreciate it. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Next step?
We await their submittal.
Right.
Anything last to comment? Dennis, welcome.
Thank you.
You sure you want it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Actually.
Motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.